Many people who follow my work may not like this video. In fact, I know they won't. Many people who say that they think for themselves or follow independent media will not watch or like this video, and that's precisely because I'm saying that I like an individual who often goes against the grain in the alternative media, Professor Dave, which they may assume is part of the mainstream media. And perhaps he has some vested interest in his own worldview, just as the people in the alternative may have their own interests in their worldview, their attachments, if you will. But I would argue it is very important to have these contrary perspectives. And if you are someone who is an observer, a philosopher, someone who's genuinely looking for the truth, you will not side with either one. You will be able to discern. You'll be able to listen without feeling the need of defensiveness, of having to go on some rant to prove someone wrong, but to genuinely hear people out, even if you do disagree with them, hearing them out to their fullest extent. And I find it absolutely valuable that even if you disagree with someone, you understand fully their own argument. So you know why you disagree with them, right? We need people to think for themselves, and I think this is a shared message among someone who may agree with the mainstream narratives, who says they're thinking for themselves, and someone who is in the alternative, pushing the certain alternative message and saying that they're thinking for themselves. If they're both claiming this, maybe they're genuine. Right? But it's quick for the alternative to say, oh, well, they're paid off, they're shills, and for the mainstream to say, oh, look, they're grifters and they're pushing this so they can make a buck and get some attention. And you know what? There's going to be those groups in every group. There's always going to be people out there trying to manipulate, trying to thwart, trying to psyop, whatever it is, right? And it cannot be said more that this idea of paranoia or schizophrenia being associated with the conspiracy theorist is, in fact, a real phenomena that cannot be denied. And also at the same time, however, that if somebody has a lot of rough experiences in their life and they go through traumas in systems that are mainstream, they're going to start to get skeptical of other systems. They start to get skeptical of other people around them, and they have other experiences that lead them down a certain rabbit hole where they are looking for justifications, looking for reinforcement on what they currently believe. And in this age of such media saturation where there's information everywhere, it is easy to find support for any given hypothesis. Even your own. What, again, you think is your own. Do you really even know if it is your own or based on your own studies? And to some extent, do you want it to be? Because just like anything else, you could not be listening to others when you should, and you could be trying to peddle your own worldview, or you are taking everything from others and you're not promoting your own worldview. Again, my goal is to make you question everything, including yourself, but especially what you think you know. Hence the saying on my wall, neti neti. It's not some spiritual saying that comes out of some tradition, although it does. But it's to say that you're not this, not that. You're able to just be yourself. If anything came from my Cult World documentary, it's in recognizing who you are beyond the identities, beyond the attachments. And I think this is something we can all agree with, regardless of what we think about particular worldly events, is that we would want to find some sense of honesty or real, genuine love and connection and health in our world. It's how we get to that point that seems like it's such a conflict for many, or how we go about in promoting these things. And so we have to question, well, what is going on here, right? The internet and the media, it's a huge distraction from real life, from interacting with people face to face. And rumors spread super fast on the internet, and it aggregates information, and it has a good effect of potentially connecting so many people, but also isolating so many people. A social media that seems to be antisocial, just like the cult that claims they're not a cult, and yet that's precisely why they are. My Cult World documentary shows an underlying hypocrisy among the systems that we partake in, that we think are in fact genuine when they're not, because that's how they pull people in. This constant hypocrisy and contradiction, as we also see through the layers of history of people following leaders or ideologies they think are moral or right, is only more so the reason why individuals need to constantly reflect on oneself, and why I don't produce as much videos as I had in the past. And I've made a video about that as well, because I'm not looking for attention, and I see the saturation and I see the ego in myself. And this is why I talk to people on the streets. This is why I'm talking to everyday people, because there's value, there's wisdom in them, and they don't believe in themselves necessarily, or they don't have the courage to go out on social media. And the average person sometimes knows a lot that even the people in power don't know, and they have great ideas that, they're not going to run for office. They're not going to go and do this and that is on the main stage, but they have amazing ideas. They have an amazing voice, and it's worth hearing. I think it's beautiful just to connect with people and to bring that sense of humanity to the internet and to show what it looks like. But it's one to show it, and another to live it and live through vicariously through other people, parasocial, you name it. Regardless, right? Professor Dave is someone who does use a lot of profanity, right? Oh my gosh, this person is dumb, this person's an idiot, this person's this and that, and calling it out, and then the justification as well. They're against all of academia, they're against all of science, so they get what they deserve. And while I may not agree with that exact approach, just as one may not agree with Mark Passio yelling at people and getting angry for, sharing his information and not feeling like he's heard, I look at the information, regardless of the emotion behind it necessarily. Even though the emotion can definitely pull people in, it's not necessarily the real brick and bones of it, right? I mean, there's many leaders throughout history who will use grandiose emotion and storytelling and using all sorts of hand movements like I'm doing right now, but in order to persuade you, neuro-linguistic programming or whatever, to psychologically get you pulled into a certain agenda. And sometimes it's just really good storytelling and really good, graphics and beautiful artistry of showing how things work in the world. And Professor Dave is someone who's been on YouTube for well over, 15 years or what have you, doing all sorts of work that I think deserves credit, because science is all around us and we don't give it enough of credit necessarily, right? Love and some of the most essential things in our life, we don't always sit and look at the gratitude behind it. Some of the very basic things that we have discovered and figured out through the use of science or methodologies that help us study our reality. That includes philosophy, of course, and psychology and anthropology, and all sorts of fields that are being discovered and utilized more and more. Archaeology, there's a whole debate between, Bright Insight and Jimmy Corsetti and the Joe Rogan versus the mainstream archaeologists like Flint Dibble. And I look at these different communities time to time, even though I'm not super consumed into the media world, but I find it fascinating. Because that discourse is a beautiful thing to have, even though there might be insults on the one end and assumptions on another end, or this person's not really an archaeologist, or this person is pushing this and that. I think it's such a beautiful thing. And I would invite Professor Dave to talk to me any day of the week. I don't care if I've talked to David Icke and Mike Adams and people who are called, pseudo-scientific or pseudo-intellectual, whatever. I don't care what titles the Wikipedia throws on them. I still want to have conversations with them. I still want to see the way their brain works, and there's a reason why people follow them. That even if those people are being deceived and falling into certain agendas and narratives that are even made up, there's something that within them that leads them there. It could be a trauma, could be a shadow. There is such value just in observing these mere communities and why they gain so much traction in the first place. And I'm sure, again, that people from various belief systems can agree with this fact that despite all the so-called conspiracies, the psychology remains, right? And there are things that maybe we can come to agree on, which is why I like to promote ideas like permaculture or food forestry, though even permaculture could be disputed as a certain method of planting because there's so many other methods of planting. But again, is the average permaculturalist like, no, you have to do this, you have to do it this way? I don't think that's very productive to their cause, as it's more of an ethics-based system of caring for the earth and caring for all people. It's kind of hypocritical if you have a Christian who says, love thy neighbor and love thy enemy, meanwhile saying, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe this and that. And you start to see these things when you start talking with more people, when you start looking at the bigger picture. And people are going to spot it out, and how you handle that criticism and how you handle the naysayers, I think, speaks volumes, right? But there's another thing we have to consider, which is why I like Professor Dave, not just because he's entering, an alternative viewpoint and he's sharing a mainstream perspective as one individual who's been on YouTube for a while, but people, generally, average people, aren't doctors, aren't virologists, aren't this and that. And while I don't say the title itself gives an individual value for their work or what they're sharing, it does represent a level of training that they've had to go through. And yes, it could be through different schools and education, which could be corrupted. And, there's all sorts of billionaires and influences upon the schooling system. But that doesn't discount the fact that these people are devoting their life into a certain field and that they are indeed intellectual in certain ways. Again, that's going to backfire in numerous ways. But it's not to say it isn't valuable and that the average people, they may not know really what they're talking about, because there is so much involved when it comes to these subjects, okay? And, I'm not vaccinated or whatever, okay? I have my own belief systems. I do that for my own, my own way of looking at the world. And I say that, and I say explicitly, I'm not a virologist. I don't know all the little itty-gritty details, and I'm okay with that. That's my own choice. It's my own volition. And what happens to me, it's going to be my own fault, right? If we can accept that point of view, but then I'm still saying, yeah, I want to be educated. I want to know what's going on. And maybe there's some things I don't know. I think that's a beautiful thing. There's all sorts of man-made things in our lives that we use to help encourage the natural things in our lives. If you even want to distinguish between the two, this is a whole way of looking at the world, and I often see that nature, or what is natural, is left out of these conversations when we're talking about philosophy or science, looks maxing, and, biotech, or whatever it is. It seems like some sense of humanity or spirit, right brain intuition seems to be missing, and then people pull themselves down that lane, and they spiritual bypassing, become super airy and less grounded and unable to then talk to the people who are in sciences and these different fields. I'm trying to see both these worldviews and see again why people follow them. The truth is that everyone is more wrong than they think, and they don't want to look at where they might be wrong. It's a really hard thing for people to do, and I have these conversations more and more with people trying to open their mind, because anytime I feel myself getting into a discussion where I agree with someone, I ask myself, well, where could I disagree? In the same way I wrote a book about opposites, and I'm trying to find out what is the opposite of what I currently believe. And yeah, that can make you quite the contrarian to the mainstream system. Say, yeah, I'm anti this, I'm anti that, I'm anti that. But then at what point do you put the anti on the anti? And what point do you actually become yourself and you're not just fighting something? And that's what gives you your identity, and that's what gives you your purpose. See, can you have such a thing as purposelessness, right? As taught in Taoism, Alan Watts, and these folks who didn't necessarily identify with any particular thing. Can there be such a thing as inspiration of willing imagination and knowing it's imagination and yet still partaking in it, right? Rather than taking the imagination as reality, or taking the reality so far that you ignore any sense of imagination when it's part of reality. I mean, these are just the tension of opposites in our world. And in the past, if you go on my channel, I have a video defending Nick Fuentes, who's now super popular in the media world. I have a video about Sverige, who, is being accused of being a criminal. But because of some of the views he has had regarding nature and some of the perspectives he has, Nick Fuentes, because of him challenging some of the mainstream conservatives and introducing different ideas. And again, you may be harshly against these individuals and what they do and what they talk about. Brian Johnson, right? Someone who's talking about how we can use tech to live forever and don't die, and turning it into a whole philosophy for the future. Clavicular, and we got to focus on looks, and looking good is what it's all about, right? There is intelligence in these people. These people aren't necessarily dumb for promoting what they're promoting. What they are promoting, the thing itself may be dumb according to your worldview, but the truth is that there is a value in these different individuals for why, again, they're having some sense of following in the modern day. And a lot of people are growing very rebellious, very tired of current systems. And that's a warning and part of my own content as well, because I don't want people to just be rebels. I don't want people to just be an anarchist because the government is failing. I don't want people to think government can never protect people when it's just because it is founded on conquest and slavery, because at the end of the day, it's just people, and people defend other people. So that means that people in government can do good things. That doesn't mean that the idea, the conception, the very basis of government is a good thing. I try to approach things from a rather academic or professional point of view, because I want to have that expectation, in a sense, when it comes to sharing my work. But at the same time, there's also the human element, because people are sick of that professionalism. And that's what it all comes down to anyways, when you're dealing with these big systems that seem to dehumanize people from who they are and what they truly or know is right. And so, people got no clue what is actually true or not in this saturated world of information when we're talking about things in the past with history, usually, things that are out of our field of study. We're taking a lot of things for granted, and we don't necessarily see what we're taking for granted. And one thing that we can be sure of, however, is this very awareness of ego. This attachment that we tend to have to these various ideas, or wanting to, as I've said, comparing ourselves to others and comparing these ideas. There's so much nuance from a big picture worldview. It's so hard for people to navigate that you almost cannot blame them when they're being brought and raised into this world, and then they're exposed to all various podcasts and advertisements and subconscious programming. It's very interesting, right? That it's precisely the interestingness, the dopamine rushes, the play on their own mind that takes them away from their own mind, right? They pull themselves into their own slavery. I talk about mental slavery and mind control. I see it that regardless of all the things you can talk about in the world, and I've detailed this in a video I also called The Biggest Conspiracy, statism, this belief in human authority or the right to rule, hits the roots to a lot of the evil that we see. And you can believe in all the conspiracies of the world, whether it's Tartaria and ancient civilizations and, 9/11 and 2008 market crash and where money comes from and what got created and who runs the world and what was the true history of World War II and whatever. And you can still be a statist, even if you agree with all these things, flat earth, dinosaurs not being real, and all these things I'm open to because I don't know, I didn't live there, whatever, right? But I don't say for a fact, I know it's not true, or I know it's true. Like, I'm able to see, I'm not having to be in either one of these camps. And I think it's a hard place for a lot of people to go to. But the reason why I think statism is so important and why it's beyond these conspiracies is because it's dealing with our own psychology and our own morality, and the morality that everybody in the mainstream and the alternative share, which is that it's wrong to harm another person, it's wrong to steal something from another person, and yet we're allowing this harm and this theft in a form that we're just oblivious to. And that the history of these systems that we create, that we say are for order and for protection and for consent, are very much not based on that. And that's mainstream history. I'm not pulling from alternative researchers necessarily. Like, I might cite like some historians, like Lewis Perry, who wrote a book on abolitionism that inspired me to write my book on slavery. And then there's other academics like Franz Oppenheimer who talk about this conquest theory, which, again, do you want to call it a theory? Every single ancient civilization has been founded on conquest. James C. Scott, there's other academics as well. And just because you haven't heard of them doesn't mean they aren't reputable, and doesn't mean that they don't have different information to share. But I don't have to make that disclaimer again, I hope. But, it's sad you have to make these disclaimers because people can't think for themselves. But the point is that there's so much value in trying to use the mainstream against the mainstream if you're going to expose a worldview, or the alternative against the alternative, and helping people see their own hypocrisy, because it's one of the most effective ways to sort of show the mirror, right? Looking at oneself again, respectare, right? To look at oneself again. And it's a beautiful thing, because I also do that when I'm interviewing, right? When I'm asking someone a question, or when I repeat something to someone, something that they said, which you do in health coaching as well, which is like, okay, so you feel this way, is that correct? Yes, but I also feel this way, right? Now they expand and they build off of that, and they're hearing back their own words so they can create that greater presence and self-awareness. That's what this is all about. I mean, frankly, if you're going to call yourself a truth seeker, and you acknowledge the truth is ever present or always here, but that also our understanding of truth is always evolving, then it's kind of complicated, because you can say this is the truth, but you also have to say it's the truth until I'm proven otherwise, or it's the truth as far as I know, but it may not be the whole truth, and it may just be a part of the truth, and it may be completely wrong, actually. I don't know, right? I know nothing. I try to bring people to that point, and some may come at that as a fear of nihilism, some other identity, but it's such a joyous fun to not be attached, and to not feel defensive, and to not feel angry, and get your cortisol spiked up over some thing on the internet, and over money, and over time, and all these societal things that we live our pressures by. When maybe there's other pressures at hand, like our own slavery, like the violence that is going to be brought upon the human population from a bunch of people who are just order followers and suppress their conscience. Like, at the end of the day, you can have a bunch of order followers and they can believe in all the conspiracies, but if they believe they should give away their conscience, you're going to be having another one, and you're going to be having the worst one. And that's going to be the thing that matters, because that's the actions being carried out into the world, right? At the end of the day, because you can talk about theories and ideas, but what actually gets carried out is the real gist of it, which is why when people talk about it's the Jews, or it's this ideology and that identity, it's like, okay, well, you're going to generalize about this whole group and civilization. I can understand why you're doing that, but what purpose does it serve? What does that bring us to? Well, it's the truth, right? It's like, okay, what are people going to do with that information? How are you going to navigate them to what they're going to do with that information? Or are you just going to say, you got to look at this because this is the truth? It's like, remember, truth to action. Very important. That's when it becomes wisdom, right? That's when it actually is manifesting. So this is something to be aware of, because I also made a book recently on Mike Adams' platform for the Jewish community, because using their own ethics and their own text, which again you may disagree with, they can promote permaculture and abundance on earth and peace for everybody. Just as the Christians have created much bloodshed in history, who are the Christians to judge? The Jews, who, have also created bloodshed in history, or any other group for that matter. It's the same thing with slavery. It's like, Corey, you talk about slavery and African slavery. I've heard this enough in school, and I heard this, pushed out in Black History Month and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. Like, all civilizations of the world have gone through war and slavery. And yeah, what I say sounds really unifying because it's like looking beyond all this. I'm not intending it for it to be, but it's just because I'm trying to see what really is at the root to all of this. And that's what you should do if you claim to be a health practitioner, right? Is like understand where's the cause coming from. And so the alternative becomes mainstream, and that means that even the alternative should be challenged. And it's interesting to see this rise of Christian nationalism, rise of the anti-Israel crowd, rise of all sorts of podcasts that are questioning things. And that doesn't mean that humanity is really fully awakened or they're coming to their awakening. It just is what it is. And we've always been going through so many different trials and tribulations in our lives. I think it's important to just be present and to just enjoy the moment and have fun through it all. We take a lot for granted that we have or that we can't have. We can't have a better world, or we can do this if we do that, and if everybody does this. We're worrying quite a lot, and we're putting ourselves in fear for the sake of love. And this type of self-awareness is all I want to cultivate on my channel and through my work, and I hope you see that. And I really appreciate all of you, because once in a while I'll make a community post and I'm like, well, I didn't post on Christmas, and the common response will be, just post what makes you happy, what you want to do, and that's just cool, because my followers, my viewers get it. It's not about what you're trying to do for other people or making other people happy necessarily. And I'm not trying to be a fence sitter by saying I like Professor Dave and I also like David Icke. It's just I am able to discern. So, hey, Professor Dave, if you want to reach out to me, I'll have a conversation with you as someone within independent media who will speak his mind, who is absolutely critical of independent media, but just as much as I am also critical of the mainstream media, and just as much as I will say neither one is more right than the other, that neither one has the full truth. I'm sorry if that triggers anybody out there watching. I'm sorry if any one of you are like, well, the independent media, they're more real and they have more truth on their side. Listen, again, it's just another echo chamber. What is the independent media? What is that, right? It's like, at the end of the day, are we all not just humans in this world where we're trying to figure it out? And so that's why I love my fellow man, sister, as myself, and why I'm able to talk to anybody, and why I encourage you to do the same thing without any expectation or judgment going in. And this is opening our heart to them. This is creating food forests that feed the world, things that we can agree on, voluntarism, consent. These are the mechanisms, I believe, for the future. And yeah, let's bring in the don't die with that. Let's bring in we got to look good. Let's bring in the health hacks with that. Let's not exclude these things, but let's not look at them as the only sole truth. And let's bring in the mainstream perspectives that aren't, bought off and, with vested interest of billionaires. And even if they are, let's look at the information. Like, can we do that? Right? Or are we just going to always play this game of who gets more views, who more money, and let's follow the identity, and is this person that, and this person's this, and who do I got to cancel next on social media, and did you hear about this drama? This sports team. I mean, it's just nonsense to me. But I know I ranted a lot in this video. I haven't made a video like this in a while. So anyways, I really appreciate everybody out there for watching. This is Corey Angelot. Nature is the answer. I'll be doing a series soon on naturosophy, so I can delve deeper into my own philosophy for at least how I perceive the world, navigating all these things and breaking it down from the basic understanding of what is nature. What is that concept even really in a world like the one that we live in? Thank you very much for watching.